look a bit more at decommunization and its roots. There have been, I think, attempts to de-Sovietize Ukraine for some time. I would say at least from the late 1980s, and one could even make an argument that the movement started in the 1960s with some of the dissident protests of the time. But by the late 1980s, Ukraine slowly began to adjust to the policy of de-Stalinization. I would say it was one of the slowest republics to change, largely because of the fact that the Communist Party hierarchy there was so strong and so deeply entrenched. Eastern Ukraine, cities like Dnipropetrovsk and Donetsk and others, had provided communist leadership in Moscow for many years. Khrushchev's origins were there. Brezhnev was born in this region. And therefore, it was difficult to throw off. And in 1972, when Volodymyr Shcherbytsky became the party leader, there was a tremendous crackdown on dissidents, and any sign of cultural life in Ukraine or attempt to sort of promote Ukrainian language, that was really heavily repressed. And the KGB in Ukraine was, I would say, also particularly harsh. So Ukraine was an important republic to the USSR. And when Shcherbytsky was in place, nothing was really going to change. Once he was finally forced out, and not only that, but his successor, Volodymyr Ivashko, stayed about 6 months and then took off to Moscow to become the assistant to Gorbachev, which was regarded as a betrayal. And so from that point, really, I think Ukraine began to move rapidly to get rid of these Soviet symbols, particularly in Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine really was like the Piedmont of Ukrainian independence. It led the way. And probably went much faster than either in Kiev or Moscow were willing to go. But that's what I mean. That's how I would describe the start of the de-Sovietization. Decommunization is something, official decommunization is something very recent. It was introduced only in the spring of 2015 with the introduction of what were called memory laws, which had a number of articles, but were basically an attempt, as they put it, to cleanse Ukraine of communism and Nazism. I found the addition of Nazism to be rather strange because there was very little in these articles about Nazism. It was mainly about removing communism. And this was done under the leadership of the Institute of Memory by defining who are the fighters for Ukrainian independence. And these fighters for Ukrainian independence were all organizations of the 20th century and organizations that fought against communism in some way or other. Often these organizations were fighting against each other, for example, in the Civil War period. But they could be considered to be anti-communist. Now, in other words, the entire communist period of 1917 to 1991 was dismissed. And it was dismissed as a time of tyranny. Something similar actually happened in Latvia in the early 1990s when they introduced this Museum of Soviet Tyranny, 1940 to 1990. And Ukraine has done the same thing. To my mind, the de-Sovietization is a healthy, positive sort of campaign, and decommunization could be. It certainly is not a bad thing to get rid of, say, Lenin statues, change some of the street names that really don't make any sense anymore. And yet at the same time, the question always arises, well, what are you going to replace them with? What are you going to use as the criterion? And in my view, under the leadership of Volodymyr Viatrovych, I'll probably talk a bit more about him shortly, the way that's been chosen to move forward is not necessarily the best one because the focus is now quite heavily on nationalist heroes associated with the Second World War. That's not to say there were not nationalist heroes in the Second World War, but it's just to say that by using them, you narrow the focus. You also antagonize some of your neighbors like Poland and Russia. And you really, I think, in some ways compromise your path forward to Europe if you're going to use integral nationalism of the 1930s as your ideal form, to be admired, to venerate, or whatever. It's complicated, and I don't really want to simplify it, but I felt like it could have been better thought through, and that the vision could have been much broader with the contribution of some of Ukraine's more renowned historians, for example, who debated these issues in the early part of the 21st century. A debate I actually covered in my book on Ukraine called Heroes and Villains, which came out in 2007. That was about these debates in Ukraine, particularly on organization of Ukrainian nationalists and Ukrainian insurgent army. These debates were quite deep. They didn't reach definite conclusions, but they were very open, and that's something that I don't think we're seeing in today's Ukraine. I would acknowledge, as people in Ukraine constantly emphasize, Ukraine is at war. So this is not a time to hold back. This is not a time to compromise and take a more tolerant attitude. Ukraine has to stand by its heroes. It has to stand by its resistance fighters in the East, etc. But this is not really how history should be written, and it's not really how identity should be formed, because Ukraine has actually used Euromaidan and decommunization to reform its national identity. For 25 years, it's been a kind of mix of pro-Soviet, pro-Western, no real definitive image of what it is to be a Ukrainian or a resident of Ukraine. What does Ukraine stand for? And I think that's the big problem today. It's that image. How do Ukrainians define themselves, and how should they be defined, and how broad should the arguments be? Viatrovych, for example, will say that in Donetsk region you have the archetypal Soviet man. Is that true? I don't know. I think you can certainly say that Soviet rule had more influence there, more lasting impact. But I don't think you can entirely dismiss the entire population who doesn't fall into this sort of pro-nationalist camp. And it's a complicated question, and it's not one you can resolve very easily, but it is being rushed through at tremendous speed in virtually all cities of Ukraine, which really have no say in what names they're going to take, other than they can choose the names that are provided by the Institute of National Memory.